Welcome, dear listener, to Wishcrafting. My name is Wishamaya, and I am just so happy to have you here with me today. Today is a pretty special day because this is my 30th episode of Wishcrafting. Yay! I am so thrilled to have reached this milestone. It feels kind of surreal. It might not seem like a lot, but 30 episodes is quite a lot, and I am really proud of myself and proud of the show and the community that is growing here. Thank you to all of those who have sent emails, left comments, and just been a supporter, whether you are a new supporter or a longtime friend of the show. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to share today's episode with you because I've never done an episode like this before. Today's episode is a conversational episode where I brought on a very dear friend of mine who is beloved by me, but is also a very talented artist and witch in their own right. Today I'm bringing on a friend named Lindsay, and you'll hear more about them in the actual episode, but I wanted to jump on here and let you know that Lindsay and I have a very long history. We go pretty far back. However, we were both a little bit nervous filming this episode, and I also have not done a conversational episode before. So, I just wanted to let you know that the audio quality on this episode might not be up to the standards of my regular solo episodes. However, I have done my best to make it digestible and lovely for your listening pleasure. This conversation is rich and full and funny, and I enjoyed it so much, but you should know before jumping into this episode that the main course of this episode is Lindsay and I discussing witchy hot takes, which you might have seen from the title. A little disclaimer here, because we didn't really plan any of this out, we didn't flesh out our ideas to the 9th degree. We gave our input, and I really did this on purpose. Lindsay went in blind, and I only went in with a teeny bit of information. I didn't overthink what I wanted to bring to the table with this conversation because I really wanted to just open up this space to think about the hows, the whys, and everything in between of what it means to have an actual practice when it comes to witchcraft. That being said, there is a point in this conversation where Lindsay and I discuss mental health, witchcraft, and spiritual psychosis. Neither Lindsay nor I are doctors in any way, and our opinion is simply our experiential opinion. I have left links in the show notes below, so if you want to understand spiritual psychosis and the signs of spiritual psychosis for you or a loved one, you can do that, because I want to provide as much resource as I can for you to be safe and live a life full of magic and wonder. With that being said, if I still have you and you're interested in where we're going next, thanks so much for sticking around, and I really, really hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Wishcrafting. My name is Wishamaya, and this is the show where we explore the interconnectedness between the magical and the mundane. And today I am so excited to welcome a very special guest to the show, and a dear friend of mine of over a decade. Lindsay is a talented acrylic and spray paint artist whose work pulses with the spirit of the natural world. Originally from the Blue Ridge Mountains and now creating from Charlotte, North Carolina, Lindsay's art captures the wild flow of nature and the deep currents of spirit that run through it. You might know them from Instagram as I'm Here for Plants, a name which couldn't be more fitting for the earthy, soulful energy that they bring into their creations and their life. A true 90s grunge baby at heart, both in style and in essence, Lindsay weaves raw authenticity, natural edge, and natural reverence into every piece they paint. I'm just so thrilled to have them on the show today and to share their story, their inspiration, and a little bit of magic today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wish, for having me. That was a really amazing bio. Thanks for
buddy.
that.
Yeah. I wanted to include the 90s grunge baby part because I thought that was important.
No, that made me smirk. That was good. That was really good.
Yeah. So, listeners, this is going to be a little bit different kind of episode today. We're just going to kind of be having a conversational episode today with me and Lindsay, because Lindsay and I have been best friends for a really long time, and I've wanted to bring them on the show for quite a while. Quite a while. So my conversational voice is going to be a little bit different than the podcast voice you might usually hear on my regular episodes, but I hope that you guys enjoy that. And if you don't, that's okay, because this is for fun, because it's my 30th episode. Yay! Yay! Whee! And today, Lindsay and I are going to be exploring witchy hot takes. Quite a while ago on Reddit, I posted a thread asking for folks' unpopular opinions and witchy hot takes, but Lindsay's coming into this blind, which is going to be fun.
I am ready. I'm saddled up. I've been waiting with bated breath.
So before we jump into it, would you mind telling the folks that are listening a little bit about your magical practice or your pagan path, and also about your art? Anything you want to tell us about, what being witchy and pagan means to you?
Well, I guess it's kind of evolved over the years, but I think that's kind of the wherewithal of the point. Like, your craft and practice evolves as you go on.
Absolutely.
Back in the day, when I was beginning, I would say I've probably been kind of dabbling in, like, quote, new age or pagan or witchcraft since before I knew it as a child. But I mean, when I really turned into adulthood, like 18, I kind of really stepped into it. So for over a decade. Now I would say it's kind of more intrinsic in just mundane things that I do. But it is the ritual that I have behind them and the intention that I set with either the tea that I'm drinking or the hike I'm going on, and the flowers that I'm looking at. And then that kind of, as you mentioned, goes into my art and comes out as what everyone sees, which is the plants. And sitting down with people and explaining my process, I kind of explain my process as art craft. So it kind of has evolved over the years, instead of being like actually sitting down at like what you would, I guess there's a stereotypical thought, I guess, for everything. But if you think about like sitting down at your altar and praying or doing a ritual, that for me is sitting down at my desk and creating something, channeling that process out. Because I don't think like the process of creativity is not necessarily that I am creating it, but I am the channel of the creation that's coming through. Because it's when you tap into creation, you're tapping into universal consciousness, whatever it is, across all mediums. But you're not alone when you're tapping into creativity. I'm not creating a piece on my own, like it may look like that on this plane, but like mentally,
you're channeling. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely hear you, and I definitely, when I think of you in, your relationship to paganism and witchcraft, we're very different, but we're also similar in so many ways of like how we do view the mundane and the magical being so closely connected, which is probably why we vibe so well together. But yeah, I do think of you as an art witch, and for the listeners who don't know, Lindsay's studio is a magical space all on its own. You definitely have an altar set up in there that changes with whatever you're working with, and
I do,
and I think that's really cool. But the space itself is covered in inspiration of all different kinds, and you've set it up to be fluid and to flow, and so you can call in that flow and that creativity when you do sit down and go into that space. And I just think that's really interesting. Me not being an art person, I'm a writer, I don't do like the visual mediums of any kind, but it does really help me to have my space set up when I go to write the podcast, when I work on my book or my poetry or whatever. It helps to have that sacred space. So maybe we can talk really quick before we jump into the juicy bits about like, what was your process in setting up your studio? Like, did you have any thought behind it, or was it just like, I kind of want to make this space conducive to the energy I want to bring in? Or
You're gonna you because we've known each other for so long.
I do know.
I
remember.
We'll laugh at the answer, but essentially, like, if you walk into my house now, like, I mean, I have matured in like how I decorate things. Like, there is always something that's still like authentic, intrinsic to how like I design an interior of a home that I'm living in, and then I make my space. But when I was a kid and really in the throes of creation before, life takes over and you become part of the workforce, my room was covered. My walls were covered in Sharpie, you remember. In high school, people would come in, and if you came into my room, you were allowed to draw on the walls.
Yeah.
It was completely fine. There was an entire wall made up of just vitamin water paper, like wrappers, because I loved them.
Vitamin water wall. Oh my God.
Yep. So, like, it was a space that my granddad, and my mom too, but predominantly my granddad he owned the house, and he was like, I don't care. Do what you want to do. And that is, ironically, my studio space in the office has just kind of become a nostalgic and more, mature replication and evolution of my high school bedroom.
Yeah.
Which kind of keeps that childlike wonder, because that was really the time when that room was... the inception of that room was before everything kind of got entangled with life and, growing up with relationships and
responsibilities,
everything like that.
Yeah.
So that room always, even in memory, is a safe space. So just perpetuating that and creating that, and just always having shit on the walls, something, a poster, a piece of paper, a receipt from a show,
vitamin water,
wrappers. And now it includes, my artwork and plants and other things that I have come to know are authentic and intrinsic to myself over the year. But the baseline is, high school bedroom, brother. Full send.
Really tapping into the space that you were given to be yourself, and tap into that creative space as a child and a teen. And
always remember that I can manifest that and create that and keep that going.
And it's just evolved with you getting older. I hear that. That's cool. Yeah, it is a beautiful space that you've created. And there's, for the listeners who don't know, there's art on the walls, there's plants everywhere, there's lights, there's hanging things and garlands of different plants and whatever.
There's a lot of rubber ducks.
Many a duck, yes. XOXO gossip duck.
Indeed.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And hopefully some of the listeners can resonate with bringing the bridge of the mundane and the magical a little bit closer together through wonder and joy and childlike creation.
That's what ignites passion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree. We got to play with everything. And that's... I have a very squeaky chair, and I've never done a conversational podcast before, so sorry guys, but hopefully, whatever. Before we move on from the art witchery conversation, you did mention, how you are a channel when you are creating, and I wanted to quickly let the listeners know that Lindsay is an incredible artist, and I'm not just saying that because they're my bestie, but you have recently been working on a goddess series of humongous goddess paintings. And how big are they?
They are 24 by 36, so 2 foot by, 3 feet?
Yeah, they're huge. And you had a friend that wanted to commission some stuff like that, which got you kind of flowing with those goddess energies in your art space. How's that been? It
honestly, it's been a wild ride. It started... actually with a sketchbook piece, and it started with Lilith, ironically enough. And I did the painting at a live show, and the friend actually it was someone that I just happened to run into at an event and a party, who has now become a really good friend and a collector of my art, and they were just like, I want it. And I was like, okay, well, absolutely, 100%. And then they brought the idea to me.
Yeah.
And she was like, I really want essentially like a line of divine feminine, the dark divine feminine women and goddesses and archetypes, and kind of she gave me the first 2 that she really wanted, and that was Medusa and Eris, and I've been working on them. Medusa's completed. I'm still wrapping up the final trims and trappings of Eris, but it's been really wild to sit in the energy of those archetypes and deities and goddesses and be there in that space while creating it, because especially with Eris, the chaos unfurling almost around me, just being in that space.
Yeah.
Which I feel like has actually kind of slowed the process of creating it, but it's because like I have to lean into it at certain times. Like it's like you can only create her at certain times. It's very interesting to see how the different pieces, like Medusa really came out and stood out, and the idea and the concept that I had in my brain was exactly like there at the beginning. With Eris, it's been a little bit more mystified.
Yeah, Eris is such a primordial deity, like as a concept, but also I haven't worked with her energy intentionally.
I have never either.
Yeah.
And I feel like this has been very interesting because I had to do research on her. I asked, the person who commissioned me, her, where she kind of is with her take and how she is experienced the goddess and how she is represented to her. And then just kind of like honestly, without even any consent, it's just like I'm painting her, so she's here.
Right.
And I don't have to give consent or not. Like, it's just kind of, it is here and it demands it.
Yeah, she's being channeled through you. That's so cool.
So that's been interesting, because I didn't necessarily want to sign up for a chaos pit, but I got put in it.
Yeah.
But the change and the transformation that manifested extremely quickly, catapulted because of that mosh pit that she essentially manifested around me.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for.
That's so cool.
It's weird. It's wild.
That is wild. So, just to sum it up for the listeners, so basically you started this piece with Lilith and somebody saw it at a show and loved the concept and loved your artwork and decided to commission other dark goddesses from you. And in bringing in those dark goddesses to your studio and your creative space, you've kind of been able to engage with them in different ways. But with Eris specifically, she brought chaos quickly when you welcomed her in, but that chaos has brought so many other good opportunities and change into your life that was unexpected, which is really interesting because in my head, folks get so afraid of dark deities and dark goddesses specifically, although I do feel dark goddesses are having a rising right now.
Agreed.
How could they not? The world is...
The Lilith piece is called Lilith Rising for a reason.
Yeah. The world is crazy right now, but yeah, I love that because Eris, I know a lot about her, but I haven't welcomed her in intentionally into my space, or intentionally because I am a little bit afraid of the chaos she might bring. But I love hearing your experience and how it's been positive for you. And you also went in with no real expectation for her either, just to experience her and bring the piece that she wanted you to bring forward, which is awesome. But it also reminds me of her mythology. And she is the goddess of chaos, but Eris is a place in the underworld as well. So she is very primordial in the sense that she is a fully embodied goddess, and and she threw the golden apple that started the war of Troy, and she did that. And it's kind of interesting that you say she put you into the mosh pit. That's what she did in the story with the goddesses and the golden apple. She threw the golden apple into a group of goddesses and watched all of this unfold that makes up a huge portion of Greek mythology that we have. A lot of people don't know that the War of Troy was just a myth, but it is just a myth, in case you didn't know that, folks. It is just mythology.
And Brad Pitt wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So Eris is also her earlier concepts, her earlier mythology. She is kind of like what everything comes out of. Chaos and Greek mythos, and also like their understanding of the world. Everything came from chaos first.
She's one of the children of Nyx, is she not, if I'm not mistaken, I think?
I believe she is, but the thing about the primordial deities that encapsulate, these bigger ideas of, like chaos and darkness, like Nyx or whatever, their parentage is kind of fluid because it got put into mythology later. Like the understanding and veneration and worship of them started so early that eventually, they had to fit them in somewhere.
I have similar feelings of this piece like I did when I created the Nyx piece. Because when I dove into Nyx and created that piece with the moonflowers, she was very much there and encapsulating in just mist. And I just remember feeling like just cool haze like the entire time I was in that piece, 100%. And I remember we talked about it once. I remember when we were talking about her and I drove home that night underneath the moon, and I was just like, dude, I feel like she's just shrouding my car.
Yeah.
I was like, I just feel like she's just wrapped around my car and we're just traveling together.
That's part of why I love Nyx, because she does feel like a shroud. She feels like a shroud of darkness, not just night, but like darkness, but not in a
like a cloaky way.
In a cloaky way. Yeah, exactly. Which is such an interesting energy to work with for the listeners who have not seen your piece yet. And I will be linking all of your stuff in the show notes. So if you want to check out Lindsay's art, definitely take a look at that. I highly suggest you do. All of these goddess pieces we've been talking about are there on your website and on your Instagram, right? Yeah, so a quick Google search says Eris is the daughter of Nyx, who is night, that we were just speaking of, and Erebus, darkness. But also, some sources mention her as the daughter of Zeus and Hera.
Right. Yep, I've also heard that. That's the other one.
Yeah. So, like I said, some of these primordial deities, their parentage is very nebulous based on the time that their mythology was being told and how it was
location,
where and when, and just society at that time and the evolution of it, because chaos has always been there and always will be. So it makes sense that she would evolve,
through time.
All of them would evolve, really. Yeah. So let's step out of the goddess talk and get into this juicy part.
Let's get into the hot cakes, the hot takes.
Hot cakes. Witchy hot cakes. A while ago, I posted on Reddit and I gave it some time to stew. Yeah. We're stewing. We're in the cauldron. It's bubbling currently.
It is bubbling and a brewing.
I posted on Reddit, what are your witchy hot takes or unpopular opinions, and how long have you been practicing? Here, I'll start. And this is my witchy hot take, and I will stand by it. Way too many people teach things or offer mentorship or workshops or classes to things that they have only worked with for a very short time, which, in my opinion, is unethical.
Agreed.
You agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. As someone who's worked in a metaphysical shop and then co-owned one, I will say, I've seen a lot of complications within, meshing capitalism with the metaphysical community. Because, I absolutely understand 100% an energy exchange. But when money gets involved with anything, even with art, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
So, but I will say 100% that I believe that the person that I worked under, if she was offering a class on something and was teaching it, it was a monetary value on it, but she was vetted, had gotten to high priestess level, XYZ, done so many years, XYZ, based on her indigenous path. And I do believe that that part is authentic. And seeing that model, I'm like, you can implement that. That is an easy thing to implement.
Yeah.
Still have authenticity if you're, and I feel like, especially metaphysically, if you are offering a service and you're putting capitalism on it and you're asking monetary value for it, then you damn well sure better be authentic about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's a huge energy exchange, especially in this day and age that we have created.
So you're saying, regardless of how long you've worked with whatever you're about to be offering a service on, if you're coming to it authentically, that's what's important versus how long or your level of knowledge.
I think authenticity that comes with longevity, and when it comes to metaphysical. So if you look at someone who's being authentic in something and they're selling something with monetary service, if you look at their background, they should be, had gone through rites or passages and stuff like that. They should have high priestess. They should have studied under somebody XYZ. And if that's not there, then that is a question for me, because I look at longevity as a part of authenticity. That could be just something that's intrinsic to me.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a core value to authenticity, is longevity, ritualistic return to something that you have passion for, and showing up for it and doing the work about it.
I think coming from a Wiccan start into like paganism and stuff, it was an interesting take, because coming into witchcraft through Wiccan ideology, there is that kind of like belief there that you need to be, you know, you need to go through certain levels of training, become an acolyte, be...
I know, I've been looking for the word, because I have stepped out of that world for so long, because I say that type of stuff, but like I necessarily wouldn't put my money there. Like, I don't, like, hot take from me, if you're wanting my first example, I don't necessarily believe that should exist.
Yeah. I don't think that you have to be... What is the fucking word? Oh my god. Brain. Hello? Attuned by somebody who has already been attuned, or somebody who is given some kind of rank above you needs to give you the denomination to be able to do
that you need
X,
to be
Y,
knighted or XYZ to do XYZ.
Right. Because if you are subscribed to, if you're an Alexandrian witch or a Gardnerian witch and you're studying with a group of people who are Alexandrian or Gardnerian, perhaps you do need to go through those rites of passage and work your way to priestess, high priestess, whatever, through that modality, if that's what you want to continue doing. Having a mentor in that kind of way, definitely I see, that's what my witchy hot take is you should definitely be going through that if that's what you're trying to go out into the world and bring, right?
If you're trying to be a shamanic, like, for example, like one at the metaphysical store that I worked at, she did classes in shamanic witchcraft, or does now. So for like 3 to 5 years, she went to shamanic like journeys and stuff like that, and partook in that with other people who were also on that spiritual path.
Yeah.
So that, in my mind, is like, okay, this person has experienced this, that's essentially what those classes are. It's just for people who are more tentative or scared to do it on their own. You can pay XYZ, because that's the platform that it's been put on.
Yeah.
And you can pay this money to be informed and have someone there, which, I mean, you know, turn it another way, people do that as well with like ayahuasca and stuff like that. So absolutely. I mean, essentially that's kind of the same way, and they accept money because that's society now and they need it to perpetuate the practice.
Yeah. I agree to an extent. I will say that like my full stance is nobody has to give you the permission to be able to do witchcraft, unless of course it is a closed practice. You do need to have the permission of those peoples and the people from that culture in order to practice that, in my personal opinion. I think you definitely, like, that is where appropriation comes in. If you are taking this sacred thing and then going and charging an energy exchange of money for this when you are not part of that culture and you have not been welcomed in by somebody who is from that culture and given that permission. I do think you need permission in that case.
Yeah.
For sure. But my take on what is unethical about charging for, not even charging, it's not charging. You should definitely be paid for your services. You deserve to get what you're worth. Absolutely. I think that really my witchy hot take comes in with like, it's really like the rise of TikTok and all of these young folks who have been practicing for, and it's not all young folks, you know, but there is a lot of the newer generation coming in from TikTok, and they're learning from TikTok, and all of a sudden they're hex breakers and they're posting love spell listings on Etsy because they learned it on TikTok, you know, and they did it once and it quote unquote worked, which is another witchy hot take we could talk about, but you know, but then they're like, oh, I can do this now. And like, to a degree, I think that there is something to be said about if you're confident in your magic, regardless of how long you've been doing it, and somebody wants you to do something, go for it. However, my hot take part is I don't know how confident you can be in your craft if you have only been doing it for a very short period of time. And that's why it's a hot take, because not everybody, when you're starting, you don't feel that way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
However, I've been a practicing witch for 16 years now. And I will call it 16 years because I have been doing this a long fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
And now doing this a long fucking time, I think the way that you get through to that authenticity that you were speaking on earlier is like, how much does that person admit they don't know something?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it really shows you a lot about the level of wisdom and level of integrity that this person has with whatever they're teaching or offering or whatever it may be. If they're able to say, I'm not the end all be all here. And it may work, it may not. Like in the example of the love spell, like if I'm going to do a love spell for somebody, I'm going to give you a big fat disclaimer that says, hey, this could go really wrong, or it could not work at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, maybe it works perfectly and that's totally fine. The point is having that ability to portray your limits as a practitioner to somebody that you are offering services outside of yourself for, you know?
And
whether that's energy work or a magic spell or a class or whatever.
Well, I think too, like what we're experiencing, obviously, like we witnessed the new age boom that happened before the pandemic. And then the pandemic obviously amplified it because everyone saw essentially what life would be like, essentially, if, you know, the grid went down in some capacity, some shape or form. Something rocked the world. Yeah. And it changed people's minds. It shocked their perspective. And so we're also seeing with that now the oversaturation of a market. And with an oversaturation of a market, it is very hard to hold on to authenticity. You see the same thing in the art market with contemporary art and modern art, where obviously, yes, modern contemporary art does have its place, but every single person standing there with a spatula banging a table doesn't necessarily have, that's not necessarily modern contemporary art as a form of expression. You have to now deduce and really, hot take, call people out on their authenticity, which is why authenticity is such a core value of mine, and why I think sometimes I have such a visceral reaction to how some people choose to act and choose to portray themselves.
Yeah, I hear you. I did mention this is Witchy Hot Takes, listeners, didn't I? So we're coming in strong. These are going to ruffle feathers, and you don't have to agree with anything that we're saying. My intention with bringing this podcast episode public is to get a conversation started, you know? That's why I wanted to post this Reddit thread in the first place, because I generally like to listen to people who know more than me, and I also like to listen to folks who are starting a different path than me or on a different path than me, and I like to try and grow from those kinds of things.
I don't want to be in a room where I am the smartest person or the best artist or the best witch.
Yeah.
I want to be...
I don't believe in such a thing.
I want to be in a room of people, even in my mindset, that I think are up higher than I am, that are, you know, moving XYZ, doing this, you know, have some purpose that they're moving towards.
Yeah.
I want to be in that room.
Yeah, me too.
Because that's how you get
that's
to
how
be...
you grow.
Yeah, that's how you grow.
For sure. All right, so our next hot take, we're moving on to other Reddit posters. We're moving into the Redditors now.
Okay, we got the Reddit bits.
Yes, the Reddit bits. All right, so this says, I will not take you or your craft seriously if you worship deities you haven't even bothered researching. I see so many people on here and other subs that state that they worship XYZ, but claim the most misinformed, social media warped stuff and headcanons about that deity. Or simply make it obvious that they didn't even bother to look at a Wikipedia page.
I sense the trigger.
Yes, absolutely.
That someone's sitting in right now.
Yeah.
And I can agree to some extent, but I'm also gonna always, like, I mean, I do this to myself. I don't just do this to other people, but play devil's advocate and be like, okay, like, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
On their knowledge.
Right.
And you have your own relationship with that deity. So here we are again. I mean, I agree that there's definitely people out there that are stepping in some shit before they realize what the consequences are of stepping in that. Hot take, like, gatekeeping is a thing. You don't have to gatekeep everything you have. But yeah, there are some things that can be for you. That's okay.
Absolutely.
That's all right.
Yes.
So
I agree. I agree.
You don't necessarily have to give your opinion on someone else's take on a deity, because if they really are attempting the relationship with that deity and not doing it in the authentic, way that is, that was respectful to that archetype, then they'll learn.
They will.
And if you're authentic in your craft, you know that. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason to.
You should not be commenting on anybody's relationship with a deity unless it's directly harming you or others, in my opinion. Deities are meant to be experienced, in my personal opinion. You can read. Reading and learning about deities is amazing and a great place to start. I do it myself, and I love learning. So that's why I like it. But I don't think you have to research a deity to know their energy or to experience how they appear in the world.
People didn't have internet back in the day when thousands of years ago when they were experiencing these archetypes, and they have always experienced these archetypes through time.
Right.
So you as a person have got to have a way of navigating that. Their way was different back in the day. We don't even necessarily know in totality, completion, how they did it. And now, thousands of years from now, they'll look back and be like, oh, look at them with the internet and how they used to do it back then. Mm-hmm. So it's a lens of how we get there, and then you refine your viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking it and making it your own. That's really what it's about.
That's the beauty of organized religion, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even with the conversation about Eris, we're like, oh, who were her parents? But the sources vary because goddesses and gods, deities of all kinds evolve. They evolve. That's just what they do. So we should evolve with them. Mm-hmm. And now I think it's important from a modern perspective to take into consideration the history of it, but we're not going to go sacrifice a dove for Aphrodite at her feast day. So it only matters so much, Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe some people do. I hope you're not, but because doves are beautiful and cool. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, so that's my opinion on that. A lot of people were very pro that hot take. I'm agreed.
Sure. Yeah.
However,
well, you would initially, I think, like if you initially read it, you're like, yeah, of course you. Like,
right.
What?
Yeah.
But it's just like, well, for sure. Like, if you separate ego from it for a second, then you'll just be like, and you can even, from an egotistical standpoint, if you want to use that lens, you can just be like, well, I know that, this and that, but I don't have to say it. It's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. I do think that it's not really your business.
Yeah.
How somebody else is worshiping.
Hot take.
Not a business, not worshiping a business. Don't worship a business. We shouldn't be doing that.
Your deity, your worship, as long as it's not hurting me or mine.
Yeah, as long as it's not hurting anybody, it's not really my business. And that's my hot take on it.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. I'm going to have to...
There are probably people out there sacrificing doves for the feast day. There's got to be. There's billions of people in the world.
At least one.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope not.
Same.
So our next one that we have here is don't tell anyone what your spell is unless you are happy for their energy to potentially affect it. This goes for online too, in my opinion. That's what they said.
I mean...
I agree.
I agree
100%.
Yeah, I agree. Because, don't even take that, metaphysically or magically.
Yeah.
Mundanely, as a businesswoman and entrepreneur, and friends who are the same. There are certain things that you don't share because you don't, and even before it's confirmed or whatnot, because you just don't want other people to put energy onto it before you do.
Yeah. That's why I tell new folks, this is part of the reason. This is kind of a side tangent, but that's okay. That's why I tell people who are not actively practicing all the time or that are new to the craft to cast a circle, setting a space for your magical working, whatever it may be, to go exactly where you want to go. It's containing it, and you are sending it where it needs to go in that magical space. And it helps you just contain that energy. So if you think about if you're doing something without a magic circle, or because I don't always cast a circle now.
Same.
But
Nope.
I did in the beginning, and I always give this advice because it's just so helpful. But when you put your magic out there, regardless, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's positive, negative, or gray. It doesn't matter. You know, and all of that is subjective as well. But you are welcoming other people's opinions in. That's not even with magic. When you post on the internet,
Yep.
when you tell anybody about anything, you
Yep.
are giving them the space to have opinions and send their energy to it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And that can go negatively in a magical setting or with a magical working. And friends that are listening right now, when you post your magical workings on the internet, people can undo it.
Yep.
You give them what they need in order to work your magical working backwards and undo it if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they are, but they could.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I don't post shit.
That is one thing I regret from doing back in the day. And it was, I thought at that time that I was building a craft, but really I was living an aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And I showed...
Ooh, that's another witchy hot take.
It is a witchy hot take. And I would always redo my altar for every Sabbath, and I would post it. I would post real, like, videos to my stories and stuff like that when I was building that brand, essentially, online. Yeah. But that's not what the craft is for. The craft is for me and whatever I choose to do with it.
I do feel like certain things are all right to post, like...
Oh, yeah.
You know, like an altar... I have posted, I posted a photo of Bridget when I set her altar up this year, and I posted Lilith's and Hecate's altar setups when I had them around Samhain because they wanted me to. They told me to. And even then, I was posting it with the intention of people are going to see this and give their energy to it, which is going to go to this deity or whatever the intention of the altar setup was. But I think it's just really important to know that when you let people in to whatever you're doing, you are potentially letting their energy into it. So you just need to be prepared. Here
we go. We'll bring it back. We're circling back around to gatekeeping. Gatekeep your working spells, people.
Yeah, if you are currently working a spell, if it is currently in action and you have not yet seen the fruition of whatever it is you're trying to do, gatekeep it. Just gatekeep it until it's complete.
Show that deity altar off, man. You know, give them a moment in the limelight if they want it. But gatekeep the working altar. Gatekeep the working spells. It's good for you.
I agree. And there is something to be said about being witchy. This is not on Reddit, but you mentioned it, being witchy for the aesthetic versus being witchy for other reasons, whatever
reason it may be.
And you know, sometimes aesthetics are part of the craft.
100%.
Often
they are part of the craft
because it's part of building the energy towards whatever it is that you're going, whether it's a lifestyle or a very specific working. Oftentimes, creating the space. You are an altar yourself, so aesthetic is definitely part of it. There's just a really fine. I don't even know if it's really a fine
I don't
line.
think it's a fine line. I think it's there's a thick line.
It is thick. Yeah. It is thick.
It's pretty thick. Yeah, cuz I've learned, like, I have learned from doing that. Like, I was putting that out there because to be seen. Like, sometimes would even, you know, just post the space and essentially not even work. And that's not the point of the craft. The point of the craft is not to be aesthetic, is not to push that, to show people, you know, look what this looks like, and then not do shit. That's not the point.
Yeah.
So the thick line is, I mean, showing people what you are authentically actually doing. And if you're not doing it, even if you've set the space up, like, you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
It comes back down to authenticity and accountability.
Yeah. And just what your intentions are. This is my witchy hot take, is that intention is not everything, but also it is everything. Because intention can only do so much. It's the action that comes when you're actually living authentically in whatever that intention
Authenticity,
is.
brother. I'm telling you, man. It comes back to,
it really does.
It comes back to everything.
And let's break down like what authenticity means. Authenticity, and it rolls into our next hot take actually, so that's a cool segue. But authenticity is understanding your motives. Understanding, like, that's what an intention is
what
a
makes
motive.
you tick.
Yeah.
Why do you do what you do?
Why do you want this? Whether it's, you know, shadow work or something completely opposite. Like, if it can be completely lighthearted is what I'm saying, but it's good to know thyself. It's good to understand where you're coming from.
There are small words, like, people will choose for, like, affirmations or, like, things to focus on, like, you know, discipline, responsibility, kindness, you know, stuff like that. And I feel like authenticity, because it always circles back around, there's like big umbrella terms for things.
Yeah.
Authenticity is a big umbrella term where, like, if you lock in that one, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
Your discipline will fall into place. Accountability will fall into a place. Your kindness will fall into a place. Your morals fall into place. Like, all of these certain things will just kind of like click.
Yeah.
If you're being, I think, authentic to your true self in that way.
Yeah, and even that, I just want to say and give credit to, like, it's not easy. Those things falling into place and clicking are not always smooth or simple or easy.
Because you find shadow halves of yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to choose if you want to integrate it or transmute it.
Yeah, I think authenticity does have to be fluid in regards to that. Like, you know, when you integrate or transmute, like you're saying, I think you have to decide that that's going to be okay. Whichever path that you decide to go on, whether or not you're transmuting or integrating or both, you have to be okay with what comes with
the outcome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's a hard lesson to really live.
And hard to continually self-parent yourself like that throughout your lifetime.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword, and it's one you can literally never put down.
Nope.
Yay, it's so fun here.
You could put it down, but then...
You could put it down, but it would...
You're not fighting the fight anymore.
Yeah. And then maybe you're not being authentic.
Right.
Which is why it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You can't really put down, even if you put it down. You're still...
I think you do. You constantly have to hone, because I think, like, for authenticity, for me, and how I define that is, like, being a good person, then it goes on to, like, how do I define a good person?
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
And then goes off of that, and, like, authenticity involves good morals for me. For some people it may not, but like, then so that's where stuff
and
changes.
all this cycles back into everything. It's so nuanced, but in the, you know, witchcraft realm, most people go to magic and witchcraft because they are seeking that authenticity with themselves even more, because the more you explore it, you find deeper and deeper paths into whatever it is that you're exploring, and many other paths off of that one path that you started on.
Even unlocking your authentic self, essentially, by going down that path. Yeah.
And you're figuring it out. We're all figuring it out, which is why hot takes are such an interesting thing to talk about, because we are all truly still just figuring
who is judge and who is jury.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. And last thing I'll say, and we'll move on. Authenticity is part of witchcraft intrinsically, in my opinion. And it's also part of everything else. And there is a level of, you know, what is mundane and what is magical when you talk about authenticity and witchcraft. Because I feel like they go hand in hand in on so many different levels of life. And that's it. It's all witchcraft, and that's all not witchcraft at the same time. You know, witchcraft is more than active rituals, active spells. It, in my opinion, is a lifestyle, and that might be another witchy hot take, but let's move into the next one. What this Redditor, I'm going to read this thread because it's a good one to read, and there's some good comments on this one. So the hot take is, self-empowerment will improve your spell work more than expensive ritual items, and improve your life more than spells. Yes. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That conversation rolls right into this one. And then the comment under that said this: sometimes the best magic happens when you walk empty-handed into a sacred space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hands down.
And the mundane...
Why is this a hot take?
It's Because capitalism tells you that you need tools, you need the athame, you need the cauldron, you need the stones and the books and the blah 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 blah. Yeah. But you don't.
No, you don't.
You could go walk into a place that you feel called to or connected to, and you can learn magic just by being there.
I think,
in my opinion,
I was gonna say, I think when I went through, because like, you know,
or rather engage with magic. You can learn and engage with magic just as yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you know, like the podcast world doesn't know, but I mean, I lost my mother in 2019, and that for me triggered a huge like mental health crisis almost for me. Mm-hmm. And working through everything and having anxiety attacks and stuff like that. During that time, like, yes, I did ritualistic things. Yes, I talked to deity. Yes, I worked with source and stuff like that. But a lot of that was internal, mundane work and mixing it with, like, affirmations and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it was just, like, therapy and working through those things like that. But that is magical. That is ritualistic. And doing that over time has transformed me into what I am now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to look black and white the way that you would think it is for it to be a ritual and for it to be magic and for it to be changing you.
You can ritualize literally anything. Mm-hmm. Whether it's
without any item.
Yeah, just yourself.
Just yourself.
Absolutely. I completely agree. All right. So next one we have is I feel obvious, but this is their hot take. It says TikTok and other sites do not always provide safe information for herbal uses.
Duh.
Invest in quality books about their mundane uses and effects to ensure you don't have a major fuck up.
Correct.
AI is already causing massive problems in the foraging community.
Correct.
So definitely research any books and publishers, etc.
Correct.
Yes. Literally, you can publish yourself these days easily. Mm-hmm. And I'm an herbalist on my own, and I've been studying herbalism not as long as I've been an active witch, but even at this point, it's been like maybe 8 years, and
for me, about 8 years.
I triple, quadruple, bazillion check.
I don't
everything.
Yeah, and there are certain things that like I'll find them, and it probably is like what it's supposed to be, but I still won't eat or drink or do certain things just because, unless I get a second opinion from you or from somebody that I trust, or like look it up, like even stepping off of TikTok to just do a Google search and not use AI and just actually use the internet as the tool that it was originally created for, which is a search engine.
Yeah.
Even that is more productive and profitable in knowledge for you, and the correct, I don't necessarily think there ever is really a correct knowledge, except for if it's like something that's been scientifically proven continuously.
Yeah.
But that will get you the best knowledge, in my opinion, that you can get without literally, going down a specific rabbit hole and going to a university or a library and actually sticking your nose in a book.
Yeah. Media literacy is really important, whether it's witchcraft, herbalism, or like making socks. Like, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You need to understand how to check your sources and to really go back and corroborate the information that you're getting. And then, of course, there's always, with herbalism specifically, there is an experiential element to it. But perhaps if you're exploring herbalism, starting with something accessible, like a kitchen herb, like cinnamon, or something you can go to the grocery store and buy, and starting there and learning the methodology of working with herbs before you go wild foraging for things could be, a nice place to not die when you're exploring something like herbalism.
And even, like, there's a lot that has to do with, witchcraft being online now, about the romanticizing of the process of, going out wild harvesting an herb, getting it yourself, stuff like that, which is great, which is fantastic. And if you want to still kind of like romanticize that process and still kind of do that process, you can stick with herbs and plants that we know scientifically, medically, are proven to be safe.
Yeah.
Like, go out and pick a couple dandelions and see how the energy feels. Yeah. Like, something as simple as that, you can romanticize, just like someone is doing and going and, looking and foraging for mushrooms that, may be a little bit more of a danger zone for you because there's a little bit more of a unknown zone.
Herbalism and consuming things is where it is important to, at the very least, double and triple check your sources, but like a mentor is really important in those kinds of things, in my personal opinion. And if you don't have the money to actually go and mentor underneath someone who knows more than you, going on YouTube alone. I mean, herbalism is huge. And there are tons of herbalists out there that have herbal schools, that have businesses, that know what they're talking about, that will teach you for free on YouTube.
There are a lot of people, do your research, go through Google, go through, whatever search engine that you're using that is vetted to find, vetted herbalists, and then check and see if they have social medias.
Yeah.
Then go to their TikTok, go to their Instagram, like you said, go to their YouTube, and go directly to that source, and then check that too.
Yeah, this is all just media literacy. So yeah, I agree. I agree with this person's hot take. You should definitely be double checking, triple checking, and vetting the people that you're learning from, whether it's a book or a person in person or whatever it is. You should definitely be seeing what their credentials and history are before you are putting literally any of their lessons or teachings into your body.
We are blessed now, double-edged sword, but we have the privilege now as a society that we have the oversaturation of knowledge. We have the ability to figure something out at the base of our fingertips. So we have to put in the extra work now to weed out.
Absolutely.
What is cacophony and what is not.
It is. It is.
That's what comes with the privilege
absolutely.
of untapped information.
Okay, so the next one that we have here is people pull way too many tarot cards for very simple, practical questions. I've been there, but if you don't have enough experience to understand the first couple cards, pulling more probably won't help. Will Jay text back, and it's 10 cards, no spread. That's Jay's entire biography, is this Redditor's hot take.
Okay.
And the next person said, asking tarot cards yes or no questions is already iffy at best, in my opinion. And I have been reading tarot cards for a very long time, and I don't know.
I was going to say, I would more lean to agree with the last part than the first part. The first part, you can pull as many fucking cards as you want, brother. That's, I've seen people use half a deck for one question.
Yeah.
It just kind of is, that's up to interpretation.
This part where it's 10 cards, no spread, while they earlier said, but if you don't have enough experience to understand the first couple of cards, pulling more probably won't help.
It just seems like they're just kind of insulting people who read differently than them, which I don't necessarily agree with.
You don't need a set spread to read tarot cards. And pull as many cards as you need to. I think the problem comes in when you pull the cards and you are not getting the answer you want,
and you keep pulling.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
That's my only thing
but
I would say about that.
I think I've only used a spread once. A legitimate, and it was the Celtic Cross, and it was 6 years ago. And I when I read for myself, I just normally do a couple card pulls. It doesn't ever normally get.
If I'm using a spread, I'm using it, or I'm making the spread as I go. Saying I'm setting this card here to represent X, Y, and Z.
I do that more. Yeah.
So,
It's just like a intentional ritual, a set spread as you're in the moment, whenever that moment may be.
Yeah.
Again, that's how I do it.
If it's not hurting you, whatever. Everybody is going to read cards differently.
You mad someone's pulling 12 cards versus 6? It ain't no big deal, bro. They'll just get carpal tunnel before you do. It's okay. It's all right.
Okay, well, that one was pretty cut and dry, so we'll just roll into the next one. This one is kind of long, so just buckle in. It's about mental illness in magical spaces, so I think it's important that we do talk about this one. My hot take is that as someone diagnosed with what's considered severe mental illness, particularly DID, and therefore PTSD, they said in brackets, there needs to be a conversation about considering mundane before magic a bit more often. I'm not saying this to dunk on others, I'm saying this out of concern. The times I wasn't considering mundane before magic is when I was getting exploited by charlatans, and I do not use that term lightly, this Redditor says. If you're more of a sass witch, which we looked up earlier and it means seeking atheist, or seeking agnostic, seeking science, which I think is what it said. You should at least be understanding of how magic in part is you working with your psyche. That's the last place someone else should be interfering by separating you from the world you live in. It's a slippery slope from there once that separation occurs. So basically, it seems like this Redditor is essentially trying to say that you need to consider spiritual psychosis in a magical space, and what is spiritual psychosis versus an actual spiritual experience. And I have a lot of feelings about this, but the next Redditor underneath this thread says that psychosis in the witchy pagan community is a real thing and it should be talked about. Like, there's a difference between a beautiful experience of personal gnosis and a symptom of mental illness, and people need to know how to distinguish them. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. I mean,
I think, like, if I come to you and say, like, that I had an experience with Athena XYZ, and explain the experience and explain going under and traveling and, you know, journeying and stuff like that, that does not clarify me as someone who
is in spiritual
psychosis.
Yeah.
Because that is journeying.
Yeah.
So I disagree with that part.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of people having, you know, going through something already, like mental psychosis or mental illness or dealing with something, and turning to the magical before the mundane, and then being taken advantage of by people who see that. Mm-hmm. Yes, obviously that is a problem, but that is an issue that we're seeing across the board with all religious systems.
Just with everything. Not even religious, just everything.
Yeah, with everything. I mean, that happened to me with the Christian church and my family. So that part, like, obviously that is a problem. But I don't think we have figured out a way to correctly put in check and balances yet, because that is still it's still an active problem.
Yeah, it is an active problem, and I guess knowing the signs of when somebody is having a psychotic break, or knowing when, for your loved ones and people close to you and yourself, you know, if you're diagnosed with something, this all kind of comes back to knowing yourself and exploring healing in whatever way you need. And if you're suffering with some kind of mental illness, that healing that you need might be a doctor of some kind, or, you know, help from outside of yourself that is not a deity, you know. And I think that's important, that we recognize magic is not a fix-all for everything. And especially with mental illness, you're not going to be able to necessarily, in my opinion, which might be another witchy hot take for somebody, you can't magic away your anxiety.
No, magic didn't take away my anxiety, and my anxiety is not gone.
But it can be a toolbox, or a tool in your toolbox.
It's a tool in the toolbox.
But it shouldn't be everything that you rely on. Absolutely not. And that's very dangerous when and if that does happen. And the next person in this thread actually said, I made a post discussing divination and anxiety. As someone with general anxiety disorder, sometimes stepping away from divination might be the best course of action, and it shouldn't be used to make every choice. I am just going to pop in here and say, yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're using something, anything, whether it's magic, tarot cards, divination, as a crutch to not actually...
Even as a witch, in my opinion, hot take, tarot should not be your baseline.
No.
To make a decision on anything. It's a tool in the toolbox.
It's a tool for your intuition and to help you make a more informed decision on what you need.
Yeah, the decision to the process of making a decision is problem solving.
Yeah.
And that is an intrinsic part of being a human.
Yeah.
An evolved human being. So that is what you should focus. That should be your baseline.
Yeah.
Actual mental, like, and even, you know, verbal problem solving, whether that be with yourself in a room or with someone else to bounce off of.
Yeah.
But tarot is not your baseline. And I say that as a witch practicing for over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think magic should be what you initially turn to in times of any physical crisis, whether that's a mental illness or an illness. We have allopathic medicine and modern medicine for a reason. It has a place. And, you know, there are certain things that magic can't just fix. You know, and they can be it can be a tool, but it should not be the end-all be-all for very serious things like spiritual psychosis. Absolutely. And it is important on the other side of that to be able to recognize, like, inform yourself and recognize signs of somebody who is claiming to be, you know, a shaman or an oracle or a teacher or whatever. This is going back to the vet your information, vet your teachers, vet your people, to be able to say, like, is this something I should actively engage with?
I mean, tie in the real world into it. Always be wary of someone that stands on a platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, always have that skeptic mindset in the back of your mind to keep yourself, you know, protected.
Yeah. And I think you know, I'm bipolar, and it is a interesting line to walk when it comes to things like mania and talking about spiritual psychosis, because I have had so many very deep experiences where I was journeying or going into trance or astral projecting or just otherwise having a very out of body or sometimes even in body, just spiritual experience that if I were to tell it to your average everyday person, they might be like, oh, you should probably go
Not
check yourself into a psych ward. But I'm okay and I'm safe, and through therapy and having a support system that was not inherently like magical, I now understand my different baselines and what my warning signs are. And I mean, I've been in remission from anything like that for a while, but the point is that you need to be able to understand what you're going through. And if you're going, it all just goes back to media literacy, checking your sources, you know, the content you're consuming, the person you want to consume information from. You should definitely have a way to vet them. And if there is no way to vet them, then perhaps consider something else. And if you are experiencing some kind of mental illness, perhaps turning away from a magical anything and first taking a step to get back to whatever your baseline is the safest course of action.
I mean, essentially that is, and if you're sticking to like what I think is an intrinsic part of like witchcraft, I mean, it's even like, you know, still kind of practiced today. Like there's certain times, like astrologically, like when stuff is really happening and popping off, like maybe, you know, you don't do any, you know, really transformative or push manifestation magic during this time because like chaos is around and like you don't know where it's going to land. Like you can have intention, but certain things will affect certain things, in my opinion. Even
if you don't have mental illness, like it's important to know what your grounded baseline is.
Baseline and grounding is the intrinsic part of witchcraft in general. Shielding, grounding.
Yeah.
Shield and ground are the two things that you should learn immediately. Because I feel like we should learn those just in general as human beings, but people are more taboo to it because it is, you know, linked to witchcraft. But those things are intrinsic as a human, to be able to not feel overwhelmed, to be able to push through something that you may be scared to get through, like shielding yourself and being able to neutralize, ground, and go.
Yeah, you're making me, well, I guess that kind of reminds me of a friend I used to have. She was new to the craft, and she was quite a bit younger than me at the time. This was like a long time ago, but she was going through a hard time in her life. And she had turned to magic like a lot of us do because she was going through a hard time in her life. That's great. And it is wonderful if you take that and you work with that as a tool to pull yourself into a more grounded space, a more stable space. But it's not the answer. And during this time, I just remember she was going through what we now know to be the start of a psychotic break during that time. She was certainly going through a ton of hard things at that moment. And I remember just during that time, she was like the most woo I had ever seen her be. And everything was a sign. Everything that she saw was a sign, and it was telling her what to do next. And she was just always in that headspace of like, oh, I'm in the flow, and spirit this, spirit that. This is a sign for this. Oh, this means I should do this and go to this place. And she was ungrounding herself. She had no baseline. Even more so because she wasn't coming to that.
She couldn't come to self.
Right. Yeah. Right. She was in chaos, and so she was looking for a way out of the chaos and just, like you mentioned, finding more of it. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to leave that one. Oh, this is a good one. The next one that we have here is that, and I have strong opinions on this, you don't need to cleanse your tarot cards. They work better with a little energetic funk on them. What do you think?
I'll give mine first because you do tarot a lot more than me. You use it as a divining tool a lot more than I do. I can't tell you the last time I cleansed my cards.
Yeah.
And I shuffle them. You could count that as cleanse because I'm shuffling, I'm moving the dust off of them. But the last time that I actually, at the beginning, when I was new and like about more of the aesthetic, I cleansed them. And I kept them in a bag with clear quartz and a rosemary sprig.
Nice.
Yeah. And all of my bags that I keep them in now were kept in a box that was covered in patchouli, so they just smell like patchouli. So that to me just wards and just keeps them all nice and yummy. So I'm like, that's my mentality.
But you intentionally brought that patchouli in to ground and center the cards for when you're ready to enter the space with them, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily cleansing them of all of the energy of whatever your past readings were. You know, it's just creating keeping them in that box. That box was the sacred space that you created by anointing it with the patchouli for the intention of having the patchouli ground your cards for when you're ready to step in.
Yeah, so I guess there was a little intention there. But I don't cleanse. I'll program.
Program's a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't cleanse my cards. And for the listeners who don't know, I am a event reader, so I go to different events like weddings and banquets and all kinds of different things, and I read cards for large events as a side hustle. And I don't cleanse my cards. What I do is I get the person that I'm reading for to shuffle the cards.
Yeah, that's like a reprogram
energy into the cards. But I don't cleanse the energy of the other people who I've read for before them. It's been so many also. And I do
you use the same deck for that every time you event read, or are they different decks?
It really just depends on which deck wants to come with me. I go and I ask which ones want to come, and I take which ones call out. So no, it's not. And I actually kind of think that the fact that I don't do that gives more juice to the potency, so to speak.
Essentially, all your decks are programmed for that.
Yeah, I mean, my decks are programmed to whatever I want them to be programmed for. You know, I read for myself, I read for my friends, and I read for events. And reading at events is so much more different than reading for somebody you're very close with. But I don't cleanse in between those because, in my opinion, we are stepping into a space where we are engaging with the spirit of whatever the card deck is, whether it's tarot or an oracle deck, and that is enough.
Yeah.
We want to put our personal touch on it, our energy signature, which is why I get the person to shuffle, but I think cleansing is kind of moot.
Yeah. I also
when it comes to this anyways.
Hot take, like I don't cleanse my stones on the regular.
Me neither.
I will sometimes go on hikes and take a specific stone with me, or like my jewelry, like that I wear on my neck. I'll put it in running water of wherever I'm at.
Yeah.
To take it with me.
Yeah.
And to kind of keep that energy there.
Yeah.
But I don't cleanse anything. And I guess that maybe like putting it in the water is also kind of cleansing and then pushing it back in. But
I do that too.
Yeah.
But
that's all I do. Yeah. I don't cleanse my stones anymore.
Yeah, me neither. Like, it's also, my head is like, oh, it's kind of egotistical and like such a human, almost pompous thing to think that we would need to actively intervene in order to align the energy of something like, you know, a stone or even a tarot deck, which tarot has such a long history, you know.
Hot take. I think that the process of cleansing stones and reprogramming them, because like societally now normally it is said that you cleanse with sage. So that's just perpetuating the market of people to come in and continuously buy sage to cleanse their stones. And then now you see that we have the oversaturation of the market, which led to the overharvesting of the sage, which led to, you know, every problem that we had.
Indigenous cultures having less access to
Correct.
this sacred herb that they use in their rituals. Yeah.
A hot take, I feel like that's just a way to perpetuate spending in the metaphysical community.
Yeah, I could see that. For sure. I think that cleansing has its place, and you need it less often.
And you don't have to use white sage to cleanse something.
No.
There's so many ways to use any herb to program it to help you, and some herbs already have that intentional.
White sage is like spiritual bleach.
Yeah.
You're getting rid of
That's what I always.
everything.
That's exactly what I would tell everyone when they would walk in, which is why we always market it and funny. Here we go, but that's why we always marketed a step 2. It was authentically marketed to do that, but it was to get people to buy other things and to always buy sage and something else, because I always said that. I was like, if you put white sage in your space, you are ripping everything good and everything bad out.
Yep.
And it is just absolutely neutral, and you have to put something back in.
Yep.
And that's why we always marketed like Palo, eucalyptus, rosemary, herba santa, lavender, to follow behind the white sage.
Yeah, something. That's a really interesting take. I haven't even thought about it in that way, but yeah, that feels resonant in not the best way either, but that's okay.
I have had the same white sage box. Like, I have a little juggy container of like all of the bits and baubles that would fall off, and I would take them.
I have the same thing, yeah.
And I have had that since the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's not even halfway empty. And I just use a leaf at a time on special occasions whenever I, want to use it. Do the things that I do in that process because it's in my possession.
Yeah.
And go about my merry way. And I will probably have that box of sage for 10 more years. You don't have to go out and buy it every week like people do and burn it.
I have approximately four bundles of white sage in my possession. 3 of them are completely untouched because they were given to me by a friend. And the other one that I have used for, since the beginning. And it's still kicking, going strong, because I don't work with it unless it's a big deal.
It's a special one.
Yeah. That's fun. And I'm glad that we brought that up and we ended up talking about that, because that's an important thing that I think not everybody knows still, Yeah, so just to continue underneath this thread a little bit, somebody said, OMG, yes this, I cleanse and bless my decks once when I get them. Did that with my first deck I got 19 years ago, and it still gives crazy accurate readings. I don't even do that. I just sit down and attune myself to the spirit and the intention of the artist in the deck. But
I have done that because I haven't purchased any deck ever online. I've only ever purchased it from a store or the one that you gifted me.
Yeah.
I didn't cleanse the one you gifted me, but I did cleanse the decks that I purchased in person. I did actually do that.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. My take on decks is a little, maybe it's different, I don't know, but I just like your art with channeling not just nature but the goddesses. Like, I feel like especially with oracle decks and the more modern tarot decks, the artists have an intention that they're putting into the deck that is woven into that deck regardless of where it goes and who has it in their hands. So I like to just take time to look at the cards and really try to catch the vibe, so to speak, of whatever that deck is, and kind of align myself with it when I first get it, and then every time I use it after that, you know. And the more you use a deck or work with a deck, I don't like the word use, but work with a deck, you get more and more aligned to whatever the spirit of that deck is. But I wanted to continue this thread because after they stopped talking about decks, somebody said, everyone wants to strip all of the dark energy away, and they don't even realize how powerful that stuff can be. And the Redditor that commented after that said, a witch a bit older than me at a pagan camp recently was complaining about a bunch of New Agers trying to cleanse an area she'd used for a decade before them. I heard her yell from across the way, don't go chasing the darkness out of here. I put that there on purpose.
Fucking righteous, brother.
I love that.
I'm with the old biddy.
So am I. Like, yeah, don't move my darkness.
Don't move my darkness.
Leave my darkness alone.
Go shine your light over there.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. Don't move my darkness. Yeah, no, I'm about that, brother.
I love that.
Full fucking send.
I love that so much.
Hot take, I am more wary of a love and light witch than I am
Oh, yeah.
a dark one.
Oh, absolutely. It immediately puts me off. And that...
I have to work against it sometimes. Because,
yes.
like, there's a lot of really sweet, good people out there.
Absolutely.
And I have to really kind of, like, push back. Because my first thing is, like, if it's love and light, I mean, that flag is going up and she's waving.
Yeah. I think at this point now, my flag comes up and I'm like, ooh, let's check in with that. But when I started my spiritual journey, I was a love and light person. I mean...
Yeah, you...
So... yeah. Yeah, I really was. I was a love and light person, but I was also hella young. And it was my intro. And I think that's a great intro to have.
Yeah, it is.
You're perhaps not ready for...
It is, because I was 100%... I got dropped into darkness right at my beginning.
You did. But that's just... Your affinity is towards the shadow, and you have never felt uncomfy there. I did. And wanted to come out of that. And so Love and Light sounded amazing to me in all of the different ways I was hearing about it and experiencing it. And Love and Light is not bad either. I think that...
No, it's not. It's good, but...
It's the flag goes up now when I hear somebody come forward with that at the start.
Yep.
And then I'm like, okay, flag's up. Let's check in and see how they feel about shadow and darkness. Because if you completely... annex the shadow and darkness, there's an incomplete picture here. You can't have one without the other.
Or there's something that you're hiding.
Yeah. Something you're hiding, whether that's conscious or subconscious. But either way, I'm not necessarily ready to engage with that kind of
or get marred by it.
Yeah,
Hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be close to something like that at this point in time because I got my own stuff that I'm dealing with.
Don't we all, brother?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just not able to welcome that into my life right now for various reasons. But anyways, next one we have, this Redditor says that people need to stop saying absolutes in the craft. I've seen so many times that the way someone practices is not valid because it doesn't fall into somebody's viewpoint of the world. Just because one person practices a different way than you doesn't make their craft wrong. It's just a different path. I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what we've been saying this whole time. Just wanted to pop that one in there to reaffirm that, yeah, nobody knows shit.
Yeah, give this bitch a megaphone.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a hot take. Hot take. Ready?
Ooh, hot cake. Here we go.
Okay. Oh my god, this one says, your pet is probably not your familiar.
I mean, yeah. Probably.
People are not ready for that one.
No, they're not.
They're really not ready for that one. Historically, they have been non-physical familiars in witchcraft. And so, with the evolution of familiars, I feel like, from a modern take, there is something to be said about having a physical pet that is a soul pet that aids in your witchcraft. And with the modern evolution of that word, you can call them your familiar. But I don't think that every pet is a familiar or has the interest even to aid you in witchcraft. Not everybody wants to be a witch. Not every pet wants to be a witch. You know, that's just how I feel about it.
And if you're thinking that your animal, and I feel like this person is also saying this because it's animal singular, not plural, get you a couple animals, and get you a couple animals of the same type.
Yeah.
So get you a couple cats, get you a couple dogs,
right?
And you can tell.
You can
tell.
You can. I mean, Lillian. I had a Great Dane named Lillian. She was the best girl ever, but Lillian was not interested. She was so smart and she was so intelligent, and she definitely was like a person in a dog's body. Had no interest in what I was doing magically ever. In fact, gave me the side eye quite often when I was doing witchy stuff. Lillian was she was soul family in a dog body, but she was not my familiar, and I know that.
For example, I say this because I have 2 cats, and they're like, one is definitely mine and one is definitely my partner's, Risk and Houdini. Houdini could not be farther from the craft or me, honestly. I mean, like, he tolerates me, don't get me wrong, but like, I think Wish here has seen him maybe twice.
He's a scaredy cat.
He's a scary boy, but he only likes his dad. And my cat, Risk, he doesn't work, but you can tell too. I wouldn't necessarily call him a familiar. I would call him a protector. Because, like, you can tell, because, like, animals will leave the room if you're practicing. If we're talking about familiars as, you know, an actual live organic animal. Like, they will let you know if they are uninterested, like you're saying, like that. And, like, for example, if I ever am actually doing working ritual, normally, like, Risk will sit, like, right behind me. Or whenever it was with the top table, he would sit underneath it. And he would sit right underneath where I was working. And it's not that he's interested in actual, like, his energy being used. It's like he's just kind of sitting, observing. And that's a lot of what animals are doing.
Yeah.
Some don't want to observe it, and some don't want to be in the energy, and some do. Like, my cat likes chaos, and we both know this. And I feel like, ironically enough, pulling in the conversation about Eris earlier, like, I've never worked with her, but I do a lot of transformation in chaos, so I could say that I do a little bit with chaos magic, like, unintentionally.
I think you have worked with her now. It's just not been, you know, you brought this piece of art channeled with her energy. That is working with her. It's just not necessarily the traditional, you know. But
chaos and battle, it's ironic at how I had to work on how I react to it, but that's like my baseline. Like, if I'm gonna go into something like the Morrigan, like something like that, if I'm going to get something done, like, that's how I'm going into something. Like, I'm going into battle, whatever it is, even if it's a positive situation. And that's how I get through things.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Long story short, no, not every pet is your familiar, and most likely they are not. That's my opinion on that hot take.
I mean, they're just observing. They're just there in the space, and
they're beings.
A part of it, like, I mean, and going to the inorganic things. I agree with that more. Like you were saying, like, a familiar to me is paintbrushes that I don't get rid of. Like, some that, like, are literally have, like, shat the bed and they need to go.
Yeah.
But, like, that. There's brushes that I'm never going to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because I use them for certain things sometimes, and they're always used in a painting. So, like, something like that is something that I would say is, like, something that is a familiar, something that is a ritualistic, like, return to. But even that's just a tool.
Yeah.
Like a tool familiar.
That's what I was going to say. It's like, it's a familiar tool.
Yeah.
But just for those folks who don't know, like, the idea of a familiar is you call a spirit to come and aid you in your workings. And this really comes from Crowley, I think. Like, Aleister Crowley was the one that, like, popularized the idea of a witch's familiar in a ritual way. And, of course, during the witch trials, they had the idea of a witch's familiar that was called through pact with the devil to aid in her sabbats and stuff like that.
do bidding, essentially carry the energy forth to and fro, and like
but the belief during the witch trials was that it was a spirit that took form in like a frog or a toad or a rabbit or something, and it was really just a tool that they used to persecute.
It's propaganda.
Women. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, that's maybe I'll do a whole episode on familiars.
Hot take. I mean, really like sitting here and like deducing it, like. I just think animals are just like, sentient. They're beings, and they're aware of what you're doing, and some of them want to be a part of it, and some of them are not. Hot take, I don't think familiars are a thing. I don't. Yeah. Like now that like we're sitting here thinking about it and like really deducing it, like, and talking about it and kind of like picking it apart.
Yeah.
No.
I think the better term for what we're talking about familiars being and how they're known would be like servitor.
Yeah.
You call, like, I mean, it's a little different, and we're not going to get into that right this now. That's going to be a podcast episode. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go and talk about the differences between familiars, servitors, thought
because that is, you have to really think about how much is actual practice, and how much is propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very important to think about.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is a pretty hot take as well, and it's in quotes, so it's not a sentence. It's just a quote, and it says, quote, I'm going to read it in the voice that I read it in my head, okay?
Okay.
Quote, I want to hex someone, but, like, not actually hurt them in any way so that I can still feel like the good guy. You know what I mean? Hey, buddies. If you're thinking about hexing somebody, you're not going to be able to control the exact outcome of that hex, no matter how specific you get in the wording, in the elements of your spell. In my personal opinion, jinxes, hexes, and curses can go only so specific.
Mm-hmm.
But how they play out in that person's life, in actuality, you can't. I mean, you can't put a tightrope on that.
Hot take, because I can't really say anything farther, because like as a witch who's, I mean, been practicing for over a decade, I have never hexed, cursed, done anything in that realm in my workings. Mm-hmm. I don't touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I have.
I know you like, that's why I'm like, I really can't, but that's one of the main reasons why I won't, like, I don't, because I don't, it could boil down to just ego.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to be affected by something negatively.
Yeah.
And I can damn well sure protect myself.
Yeah.
And in those protections, if you come at me, like, yeah, it will backfire. But that is like, you hit first.
Yeah.
So that's on you. I'm not going to, and I have had the privilege of not necessarily seeing a reason to attack someone outright.
I personally, not even with, baneful workings such as this, but just in witchcraft in general, you can't be too specific. You have to give the universe and spirit and the magic space to actually bring that working to fruition. And if you put super tight boundaries on it, then you really narrow your window of
misfire.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, and just fruition and possibility. You just really narrow it down. It might still work, but sometimes you do everything right and the spell doesn't work because you narrowed it down too much.
It feels like you're trying to put something really big into a really tight box, and that's why I'm saying, like, you're trying to, like, quell something, maybe like a circular orb, this beautiful glowing orb, or dangerous orb, maybe, red light, let's say laser, if you will, into a box, and trying to program it to do exactly what you want to do, but it's so big that it's poking out of the box like a laser, and that red beam can just really fucking hit something that you don't want it to hit.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're trying to quell it.
Also, this is my hot take, that if you have the thought in your head, I'm thinking about a hex, a curse, or jinx, but I want to somehow be able to remain the good guy, you're not ready to hex, curse, or jinx.
Exactly.
Period.
Yep.
So that's my full stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how justified you feel or not. And then this person put another one, and they said, people who use the word karma like it's Santa's naughty and nice list. And yeah, I've got to agree with that. If you're saying, oh, well, karma's going to come back around and get them, you don't actually understand what karma is and you need to go look into it. This is actually a ideology, theology that signifies the principle of a concept that happens in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, which are...
It's definitely been whitewashed and is used
in
colloquial talk. Yeah. Easy.
And it's just the actual meaning of it has been so fucking lost. Mm-hmm. Karma is not... I
definitely fall. Like, I definitely do this. Like, I do it sometimes and I shouldn't. Like, 100%. I'll take accountability for it.
Yeah. Maybe I should do an episode on that as well, because it is a very interesting concept when you actually go into the beliefs when it comes to, like, reincarnation and explaining suffering.
When you don't take it out of context.
When you don't take it out of context, it's a really lovely and beautiful idea that can actually serve as a, like, integrity guide for your life. But it's very, very whitewashed at this point in time. All right, so I really like this next one, and we might end it here because it's a pretty cash.
I see.
But all right, so this Redditor says, "Hey, which since 2006 here, my hot take is figure out your own correspondences, and I don't mean." Quote, I want to do a love spell, so I'll just use whatever ingredient
snaps for the room
I have around that looks like it could be good for love. I mean, get cozy with what you're working with. Want to work with plant magic? Research the histories and medicinal uses of the plant. Meditate with the plant. Give it offerings. Draw it. Think about your own experiences with it and find your associations from there. Want to work with planetary magic? Research the hell out of the planets themselves as a real and scientific object in astronomy. Research the historical understandings of them in your cultures and traditions. Research the astrological significance and meditate with each one in turn. Do the same thing with crystals, metals, or whatever else you're wanting correspondences for. Correspondence tables are useless if you don't understand why the correspondences exist. Yes.
Thank you.
Your magic will be so much more powerful if you engage with your ingredients on a deeper level. Absolutely. 100%. I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
Which since 2006, coming up on 20 years, and that's tying it back around to the very beginning where I said longevity of practice.
Absolutely.
Is a huge thing that is like, okay, authentic. Like I would sit down, I would pay her $50 to talk about her craft.
Exactly. Yeah.
100%.
Totally.
Because like I see that and I read that and I'm like, okay, that reminds me of when I first started with crystals. I sat down and I would buy a crystal. I would buy 3. I would buy them intuitively based off of what I would like. Shiny, whatever, how good they felt, didn't matter. Would go home and would research them for hours. And I have the book still. And it's a full spiral-bound journal that I filled to completion and then another half-full one of all of the rocks that I own and notes about them. Mundanely, scientifically, metaphysically.
Yeah.
And what they would do.
And even that, you still have to go deeper and have your own experiences with whatever it is.
And then I work with them and then go off of that. And like it's cool now because I can pick up my little book and I can be like, okay, I've got a Sabbath coming up and I can look through and I'll be like, I'm grabbing this. I wonder what I wrote down about this. And see, and then look it up again and see anything else and then sit with it, meditate with it, do all of this.
Yeah.
Like, I would have, like,
Yes.
Snaps for the class.
Yes. High praise for this hot take. Also, I lied. This is going to be my very last one because it's hilarious, and I agree. Okay, so our last one here was from the same poster. So they said in their second hot take, oh, also, my really hot take, and it's piping, is that spelling magic with a K is irritating and feels like cosplay and like we're LARPing being witches. Oh my god.
I agree. I agree so much. And yes.
I low-key think it's so annoying.
I do too.
And they spell it with a K.
I hate witch with a Y too.
Yeah.
Unpopular opinion, but I do.
I have spelled it with a K. And this person continues to say, I get that it's a whole distinguish it from stage magic thing, and I often have to use it when searching for specific information on books or the internet. Me too. Mm-hmm. And even with publishing things, occasionally I've had to use it with a K so that people did know I'm talking about
where does the K
fucking
come
witchcraft.
from?
That's a good question.
Right?
It's
like,
a really
why
good question.
is it Old English just or did it because, like,
I don't know.
Did we just drop K and now we're just irritated when it pops back up?
Maybe it comes from Gardnerian stuff.
Something.
When they were trying to make it all fancy, but I'm not sure.
Old magic.
Ye old magic.
Magic. Sounds like I'm playing Skyrim.
Yeah. LARPing. We're just LARPing as witches. Magic.
Okay, so hot take, how do you feel about fairy?
Oh, with the AE?
Yeah, or the AI.
So like FAIRY versus FAERIE?
Yeah, or FAERY. Either or.
Oh, well, FAERY I know to be a certain magical tradition.
Okay.
So that's how that is a specific lineage of magic, like, that you go and you are part of that group and you learn their ways that they do things. So that's like a specific kind of, I think it's a Wiccan sect of magic, but I'm not quite sure. So that's how I view that.
So then FAERIE or fairy.
Yeah, for me, I don't really care, but I do think that fairy, FAIRY, is a little bit more like, teeny.
I think it's Gen Popper.
Yeah.
Little teeny bop Gen Popper.
I definitely have a certain image in my mind that comes up when it's spelled that way.
Fairy,
like a little tiny person wearing leaves and having tiny wings, like, that's small. But when I think of FAE, that spelling, I think of the Fae or the realm of the Fae. And I kind of, fairy feels more like, fairy with a FARY feels more fairy tale book. And then the other spellings are more for understanding and interacting with that mythology and also the magic and just the realm of the Fae in general. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. What about you?
I feel like fairy, like FAIRY, is kind of like how we were just kind of talking about, like, whitewashing karma.
Yeah.
I feel like that is like the spelling that has come down the pipeline from fairy, like FAERIE. And because, like, I see the Fae as, like, the Tuatha Danann. Like, I see the Morrigan as Fae. Like, the Dagda as Fae. Mm-hmm. But then, like, the fairies are, like, the land spirits and, like, the sprites and the nymphs and stuff like that are more a part of the nature and, like, intrinsic to the land. Whereas, like, the actual archetypal ones that we know that are, like, the warriors and the goddesses and gods from mythos, those are the Fae, capital T, capital F. I
guess I kind of use Fae as a catch-all term for the land spirits and the Tuatha De Danann. So
yeah. I've used it that way ever since I've listened to the Irish speaking podcast, and the bard who told the stories, and it's interesting because he lives there and he grew up listening to him. So, like, listening to him talk about the mythology and then the folklore.
You're talking about Fireside, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fireside, Kevin C. Olahan and Fireside podcast. It's still everywhere. He's awesome. Listened to him for years. But how he goes back and forth between the two is really cool. Because, like, you study mythology, like, you can get degrees for that, and they study, like, that's how they know the history of their country, essentially, because it was orally, dictated. Yeah. And then you've got folklore as well, which, like, you don't necessarily, like, study on, but then that's the real word of mouth and, like, the real...
it's a living tradition. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I do have some listeners in Ireland, so Irish listeners, comment on Spotify or Apple, depending on where you're listening. I'd love to hear your take on the different spellings and what they mean to you. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Absolutely,
this was a great conversation.
Good to be here. I'm so glad we finally did this. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, listeners. I know this was a heckin' chonk of a podcast episode, but my name is Wishamaya, and I will catch you next time. And until then, don't forget to keep your roots deep and your dreams wild. See you next time, everybody.